Good morning, everyone. It's really nice to see you all here today. My topic is from the field of marine insurance. It's dealing with a particular type of special marine insurance clause, which is called in everyday insurance vocabulary, we call it Inchmaree clause. It's typical for health marine insurance, and I will try to explain how it works and possibly later on what are the possible developments of this clause in future. So this doesn't work. Okay, insurance clauses, as I mentioned, are special contractual clauses. They are commonly contained in broadly used standard marine hull insurance clauses. Originally they were designed by the London insurance market, which, as you all know, has a global impact on marine insurance in general. Therefore, we will look into the relevant English case law and statutory law and some legal doctrine, and we will point out the legal issues related to the possible application of these clauses or similar clauses in the context of marine insurance contracts. I will look in particular into the context of Croatian law, but we can also discuss the possible interpretation and functioning of these clauses if they are incorporated in marine insurance contracts governed by other national laws other than English law. I will shortly cover the solutions, corresponding solutions found in the Nordic Marine Insurance Plan. And in the end, we will just shortly look into the possibilities of application or development of these contractual clauses in the context of emergence of automated ships. We'll see what the future of these clauses is in that sense as well. You are free to stop me at any point, make comments, ask questions. I will gladly respond to the extent I can. So generally on these laws, we find it in the standard institute clauses and international marine insurance clauses for the insurance of ships. So the marine hull clauses, it first appeared in the time clauses for hulls, the revision of 1983, and then it is again replicated in the 1995 revision, although somewhat revised compared to the 1983 version. And then it's also replicated in the international hull clauses revision of 2003. This clause covers the risks that are not directly related to the perils of the sea. What does it mean? What are perils of the sea? Does any one of you maybe would like to help me out and give me your thoughts of what are perils of the sea in the context of marine insurance contracts? Anyone? Try.
The same perils as from onboard crews.
The same? Like? Yeah. Any other ideas?
I would call them nautical hazards.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
wind and waves.
Are they expressly listed somewhere in the standard clauses for marine insurance, or are they referred to marine perils in general and then interpreted by the courts? How does it work in marine insurance?
Broadly listed, but subject to case law.
Yes, exactly. So the market refers to marine risks or perils of the sea in general terms, broad terms, and then the courts interpret it. In each particular case, obviously applying the circumstances of the case, but the case law so far has taught us that these perils are nautical hazards, so there is possibilities of marine casualties, like stranding, collisions, drowning, sinking, and similar. Heavy weather, if it is extraordinary, so not the regular expected impact of waves and weather, which can be which the ships can be exposed to during their voyage, but if it is something extra. This brings us to the interpretation of the term risk in general, peril. So peril has to be something that is not predictable, that is not expected, that is extraordinary. So this is how this idea of marine risks or perils of the sea is understood, and in comparative law, more or less the understanding is very, very similar. And now in this case, dated in 1887, it was an English case where the ship sank, but as a consequence of actually machinery defect. So there was this vent which then didn't work, and the pump was blocked, and there was the ingress of the seawater into the ship, and the ship sank. And the court said the reason of the sinking is not a marine peril. Machinery damage is not a nautical hazard, it's not a marine peril. And the court decided that therefore this sinking and the consequential loss of the ship, total loss of the ship, was not subject to cover, the standard one cover, which was, and the ship was called Inchmaree, and this is how the clause actually was intended, because this was not the first time that a ship sank because of machinery damage, and usually underwriters would cover these sort of losses. But once it was challenged in front of a court, and it became a precedent case law, then the market realized that, oops, we have a problem, because something that we have always somehow regarded as a risk covered by our policies, it seems it is not. So they had to devise a clause which would give a possibility to the ship owners to sleep calmly at night and feel that they are covered in case of these sort of damages. So that is what the Inchmaree clause originally covered, was various defects of the ship, which are not directly related to perils of the sea, but the clause has evolved over time, and the new risks have been included gradually under this clause. Now, in the version of 1983 time clauses for hulls, the clause covers various machinery risks, like breakage of shafts, bursting of boilers, and similar types of defects in the ship's machinery or hull. But it also covers negligence of crew, master, pilots, and since now we're walking on this verge of possible inclusion of claims which are consequence of substandard maintenance of the ship and crew management, then the market included this due diligence proviso as a condition for the clause to function, for the clause to cover, to give the coverage. What does it mean? to eliminate the claims resulting from insufficient maintenance or inadequate crew management or substandard ship management, the clause says that the coverage excludes, so that the coverage does not include damage or loss resulting from one of due diligence of the insured or one of the relevant persons that are expressly listed in the clause. So if the insurer can establish that machinery damage, defect in the ship, or negligence of crew is actually a consequence of negligence on part of the insured person, so the ship owner, then the coverage will not be in place. And besides the insured, there are several persons along with the insured ship owner whose negligence can displace the insurance coverage, and these are expressly listed in the clause. In the version of 1983, we have these persons listed, so the insured owners, which includes the ship owner and the bareboat charter, and the managers of the ship. So this is this circle, the critical circle of persons whose negligence will displace the coverage if it is established as a cause of one of the perils listed in the clause of machinery defect or negligence of a master. Now, in 1995 revision of the time clauses for hulls, this circle of persons was extended to include also the superintendents or any of their onshore management. Why do you think this has been introduced? So the market tried to do something to affect the level of technical standard in shipping. As you might recall, the beginning of 90s and the proliferation of flags of convenience and changes in the way the shipping was done led to a very serious decrease in the standard of shipping, in technical sense. And there were many total losses, and the result of the marine insurance market was very negative, decreasing because of these huge claims. And generally, the whole marine industry and cargo, especially cargo industry, but also the states, have tried to somehow influence positively this trend and change the trend and raise the standard, but now they had to devise different means because flag state control was not so efficient anymore. And so the markets, actually, insurance market, played a huge role in that respect. P&R clubs, first of all, but also the marine hull insurance market also tries to affect that. And the revision of 1995 was one of those efforts. They wanted to raise the standard of shipping. And that is why they included all these persons who, in fact, have very evident influence on the standard of ships. However, the revision of 1995, time clause hulls, has never been done in practice, and it is very rarely contracted as terms and conditions. And to this date, 1983 revision is. There are some numbers that say that it's in about 80% of the contracts contracted on the London market is contracted under the 1983 time clauses hulls standard clause. So what does this tell us? It tells us that the market is very traditional, it's conservative, and it doesn't like to change. And like Pia yesterday was saying in a different context, we are dealing with a very traditional and conservative industry, especially the ship owners. They are not very eager to change things that they see that are functioning well, where they can rely on some sort of legal certainty because of this long applied tradition and application of these clauses in practice and expectations in case of any sort of conflicts arising from these contracts. Although the market tries to impose higher standards, this was in practice not accepted. So the 2003 clauses went back to the same wording that was devised in the 1983 revision. And unfortunately, the 2003 revision also never really became popular in practice. As I mentioned, still 1983 clauses are contracted in most of the cases.
Is there any other difference?
Yes, there are many
Which
differences.
makes it not.
But there are many differences, and in fact, I think, to my knowledge and what I have read about, 2003 is actually much better, legally better drafted. It reflects the development of case law under the 1983. So it's not revolutionary. It doesn't try to change the scope that was provided under the 1983. It actually simply improves the wording and it takes into account the development of case law. But because of this traditional conservative approach by the ship owners in practice, they prefer to rely on 1983. Now, to go back to this due diligence provision, it is very important because it actually is the crux of the clause, and all potential conflicts will arise from this due diligence provision. Conflict between the insured and the ship owner and the insurer in case that insurer tries to establish that the coverage should be displaced because of this lack of due diligence. So under English common law, want of due diligence corresponds to ordinary negligence. So if the insurer can establish ordinary negligence on part of the ship owner and those other persons, then the coverage will be displaced. And in the context of an Inchmaree clause, this want of due diligence then actually means a lack of a reasonable degree of care to take all that is necessary and that is expected from a standard of a prudent insured to have the ship maintained in accordance with the technical standards and to have crew management in place up to an expected standard in marine industry. Now, it is very important to point out that master, crew, and pilot do not fall within the range of persons whose negligence will be equated with this lack of due diligence of the insured owner or manager. So, negligence on part of the master, crew, or pilot will be subject to it will be covered by insurance, right? So any nautical fault or any sort of damage which arises from the negligence of master or crew or pilot will be covered by insurance. Then the negligence of the ship repairer and charter is also covered by the Inchmaree clause, provided again that the ship repairer or the charter is not also the insured under the clause, because the negligence of the insured is excluded. And therefore, the proof of due diligence becomes necessary for obtaining insurance indemnity only if the insurer establishes prima facie negligence of the insured owners or managers. So we are starting from the presumption that the coverage is in place, so the establishment of the relevant facts will be first, the insured will say the damage resulted from breakage of a shaft, therefore the coverage is in place. Now, the insurer will have to establish prima facie case that this breakage of shaft is actually a result of negligence on part of, let's say, technical manager. And if there is a prima facie case, then the insured will have to prove that he acted with due diligence, that the managers, technical managers, applied all due diligence to provide a seaworthy vessel, which is all up to standard, right? So that would be the shifting of the burden of proof would go in this. Is that clear? Do I have to maybe explain further, or does it make sense to you? Yes.
So
Yes.
is that a significant expansion of the cover, the inclusion of negligence of the crew?
So historically,
Yes.
historically, the market was under impression in practice that this was covered. But when we got this Inchmaree case, then that was quite a shock for the market. So the market responded in a way to explicitly give coverage for this sort of place. And it was certainly a huge expansion if we observe it from that angle. But if we observe it from their ideas, then they actually really thought that, yes, we are covering that sort of risk. But once it was challenged in a court, it turned out, no, you have to work out your wordings better to make sure that it is covered.
So was there an increase in the premiums
After that,
after the inclusion of the clause?
I wouldn't dare to answer definitely, but I would imagine that there was always an increase in premiums throughout the history. There was never a decrease of premiums in marine hull insurance. Because really I don't know, you probably know because that's also your area of research, but marine hull, which is not war, so the normal marine hull, is always dancing on positive zero. So it is never giving a lot of profit on its own, if it's observed in isolation from other marine insurance.
Excuse me, you said, are we talking here about shifting actually of burden of proof? If I understand, follow correctly, we are not covering, we insurance company are not covering this damage because it was caused by negligence. Unless you prove us that you did due diligence.
So the clause says crew negligence is covered, provided that there is no want of due diligence on part of the insured managers and owners. So in practice, the coverage is in place. It's presumed that it's in place. If the insurer has information which leads into a conclusion that there was a want of due diligence on part of the insured, and that in fact this want of due diligence actually caused the machinery problem, which was then cause of damage, then it is enough for the insurer to establish a prima facie case. Just point at a situation which prima facie shows that, look, you have a problem with this technical manager, like your ISM documentation is not in place, and so on. And then the insured will have to prove that that he actually applied to, performed under.
But he did all
Yes,
that was
yes.
supposed to do.
Yes,
Thank you.
you're welcome. And now, bursting of boilers and breakage of shaft and other latent defect in the ship. This is something that I would just shortly like to elaborate on a bit further. So insurance covers this sort of risk, if it can be defined as risk, but only to the extent of the consequential damage resulting from that defect. So the defect itself, rectifying the defect itself, so repairing the boiler, repairing the shaft, repairing the vent which was improper, or repairing this latent defect which was discovered after the damage occurred, that is not covered. Only the consequential damage is covered. So if there is a bursting of boiler which then results in the sinking of the ship, then the damage caused by the sinking will be covered. Or if there is, for example, a crane which was welded improperly, so there was a defect in the welding of the crane on the ship, and then the crane fell down and broke parts of the ship, then the repair of the crane welding will not be covered by insurance, but the damage caused by the crane falling and causing damage to the ship hull will be covered. So again, this is clearly the message. Look, the technical standard and the seaworthiness of the ship is always the duty and risk of the insured. But if it is latent in the sense that if you as insured have always acted diligently, but there was this sort of technical problem which arose without your knowledge or priority, then the consequences of that will be covered by insurance. But the problem itself, sorry, but that's problem with maintenance, it's your own risk, right? It cannot be insured. So that is how the clause works. And now I will just shortly lead you to the situation under our Croatian law, and that might give you some ideas by analogy how things might be working under your own national laws. Why am I doing this? Because London clauses and then American clauses, which are very similar to the London ones, and traditionally have always actually evolved on the basis of those London clauses, they represent huge majority of all contracts that are actually concluded in practice. But sometimes these contracts are then subject to different governing laws. So in Croatia, the tradition has been that all ships engaged in international trades are insured under London clauses, time, Pulse 1983, but are subject to Croatian law, governed by Croatian law. So insurers in Croatia usually delete the clause from the hull clauses saying that the contract is subject to, governed by English law and subject to the jurisdiction of English courts. That clause is deleted and a new one is added saying that the contract is governed by Croatian law and is subject to the jurisdiction of Croatian courts. And now we have a contract which is entirely regulated under English clauses that have arisen from English case law and English law tradition, governed, however, by Croatian law, which is then entirely different, something for our dear colleague to think about. And now the question is, how do you interpret an English clause in the context of a different governing law? In Croatia, we have this maritime code, which contains also provisions regulating marine insurance contracts. And it says that these provisions are dispositive in nature, so it means that the parties are free to contract freely, and among other things, choose in the standard clauses as terms and conditions of their contract, and to that extent they will override the provisions of the Croatian Maritime Code. So most of the Maritime Code provisions are actually dispositive in nature, which leaves a lot of freedom for parties to regulate their contract as they wish. Under our Maritime Code provisions, unless otherwise specified in the insurance contract, marine insurance covers the risks to which the ship is exposed during navigation, so perils of the sea, and the parties can agree to include other risks. So this gives us the freedom to incorporate Inchmaree clause into a hull insurance contract. But then we also have another provision, which actually is very similar to what Inchmaree clause regulates. There are two articles of Maritime Code which define the exclusions. The exclusions from marine insurance. So one general exclusion is that damage or loss caused by the insured's intentional act is excluded from insurance, and this is not dispositive. This is discovered and it cannot be altered by contract. So this is the only exclusion which is really hardly fixed and can be changed. And then paragraph 2 of the same article says exclusion of the insured's gross negligence, deliberate action, or gross negligence of persons for whose actions the insured is responsible. But this does not apply to master, officers, and crew, nor does it apply to damages caused by an act or omission of the insured when that person is also the master or crew member or pilot. And the negligent act or omission is made in navigation and operation of the ship. So this exclusion is dispositive. So gross negligence and deliberate action, gross negligence of persons for whose actions the insured is responsible, that is a dispositive exclusion. So we could say that including an Inchmaree clause, as it is under the, say, Revision 1993, overrides the provision of this article in Maritime Code, and because it actually excludes ordinary negligence of the insured, right? And then there is also an exclusion of damages caused directly or indirectly due to the ship's unseaworthiness, of which the insured was aware. So this will somehow affect the idea of whether a latent defect in the ship's hull or machinery is covered or not. Again, in this respect, Inchmaree clause is more detailed and it will override this provision in that sense. Oh, and then what I also wanted to mention, so there, the conclusion is that there is no obstacle under our Croatian maritime law to include Inchmaree clause, and it should be interpreted as it is interpreted under English case law, because it is a matter of free choice of the parties. Although we have a Croatian law governing, because the provisions in Maritime Code are dispositive, the Inchmaree clause will override them, and we will have to interpret it as it is interpreted in the majority of cases which we can see under English law. And now something completely different. The Nordic Marine Insurance Plan is an alternative to English and American marine insurance markets. Scandinavian market is for Europe quite a strong market, and there is a considerable amount of fleet insured under this Nordic Marine Insurance Plan. This concept is somewhat different because it is not a named perils concept, but an all-risk concept of coverage. What does it mean? So the main difference is that under English law, and so it is under Croatian law, we have named perils approach, which means that only the perils listed in the policy, in the contract, are covered by the contract, by the insurance, and those that are expressly excluded are not covered. Under all risks policy, the concept is that all risks are covered except those that are expressly listed as exclusions. So the main difference is actually in the burden of proof, because under English law, the insured has to point at one of the perils to establish that his damage or loss is covered by insurance, whereas under all risk policy, the insurer has the burden of proof to point at one of the exclusions to displace the coverage. Under Nordic Marine Insurance Plan, there are certain express coverage exclusions, amongst which are damage or loss caused by inadequate maintenance, ordinary wear and tear, corrosion, and similar defects. Insurance does not cover the cost of replacement or repair of parts of the hull, machinery, or equipment that are in a defective condition due to corrosion, lack of maintenance, ordinary wear and tear, and the like. And no reference to any potential fault of the insurer or other persons is made. The insurer is not liable for costs incurred in renewing or repairing defective parts, except in the case of a total loss or a constructive total loss, which is very similar to what we have in the Inchmaree clause, and any eventual consequential loss or damage caused by such a defective part is not excluded from coverage. So the result is actually very similar. The concept there's a generally different approach, but in the end, the scope of coverage is almost the same, or even the same. The only difference would be the burden of proof of who would have to be first establishing the prima facie case, when the coverage was in place, and who would be when would then the insured have to rely on this. The insurer would have to rely on the exclusion, and the insured would have to rely on the all-risk coverage. So that is more or less what I wanted to say so far. Now, what is very interesting under the Nordic Marine Insurance Plan is the exclusion of damage caused by the breach of any safety regulations. It is very exact. We don't go into establishing of due diligence or negligence, but the plan refers to the breach of safety regulations. So if the insurer can establish that there is inappropriate maintenance and failure to meet the minimum acceptable safety standard, then the coverage will be displaced. So basically, they are relying a lot on ISM code, on all technical standards and international conventions and standards prescribed for ships. And if any of those safety regulations can be pointed out as reason, so the breach of this regulation, reason for damage, then the coverage would be displaced. In this respect, the insured is expected to act with due diligence on the prudent ship owner. And there we're coming again to the idea of due diligence, but only in respect of fulfilling the technical standards prescribed by the international safety regulations. So if there is a breach, if there can be, if the insurer can establish, okay, so there is a breach of an ISM code provision, then the insured will have to prove that there is no causative connection between the breach of safety and damage or loss. So that is the only way that the insured can bring back the coverage in place. So I would say that the approach is a bit more exact, and it's more related to the dominant idea is to rely on the safety regulations and standards. And that brings us to the very important relationship between the Inchmaree clause and the ISM code. Because nowadays, non-compliance with the ISM code, i.e. failure to comply with the standard of due care when making a ship seaworthy or maintaining it in a state of seaworthiness, will always result in exclusion. And this is also important for the interpretation of the Inchmaree clause and the due diligence purpose. In that sense, we will have to establish negligence of the insured ship owner and manager. So designated person does not fall in the circle of these persons. So it is not enough to establish negligence of the designated person. But if through interpretation and let's say studying of the ISM documentation, we can establish that there was a privity of the ship owner or manager about the omissions of the designated person, that would be enough to establish the negligence of the owner or managers, which would then cause the coverage to be displaced. Are there any questions about the ISM code? Yeah, well, I will not go further into this, but you are free to use the slides. This is further elaboration of how ISM documentation will be used to establish negligence on the part of the ship owner or ship manager in relation to the acts and omission of the designated person. So to conclude, these Inchmaree clauses, which are specific to the standard hull insurance clauses of the London insurance market, are also in practice incorporated in the standard marine hull insurance clauses of various regional or national insurance markets. So we have a very broad application of these clauses in practice. They enable the insurers to monitor, maintain, and improve the quality of risks that are assumed under these policies. They can contribute to prevention of maritime accidents and elimination of substandard ships from insurance portfolios. And the aim is to link the insurance coverage to a certain standard of quality, maintenance, management, and operation of ships. They are very similar to other marine insurance clauses which we can find in the standard marine insurance clauses, such as clauses on ship's class or compliance with ISM and ISPS codes, change of flag, ownership or management, and seaworthiness, and they always come in a package with the same aim of affecting and controlling the risk that has been assumed under a marine hull insurance. Now, that is how it is right now. In the future of this clause, what can you maybe try to think of as a possible further development of this clause if we're thinking in the context of emergence of automated ships? What comes into your mind? So right now, to remind you, the risks listed are breakage of shaft, bursting of boilers, latent defect. Where do you think the emergence of remotely controlled ships and automated ships will affect the interpretation of this clause?
Glitch in the software.
Malfunction of the algorithms.
Right. So I guess latent defect probably is wide enough then to actually absorb all these potential software problems. What about, now we have a whole new circle of persons coming in when talking about operation of ships.
Remote operators.
Right, so now crew and master, they're not the only potential risk carriers, right?
The IT guy.
Right, the IT guys are there now. Do you think that the clause will have to be revised to somehow include them? Because now only crew, master, and pilot are mentioned.
And the other people whose acts the ship owner
Is responsible, but will as free
probably independent.
and independent contractors,
Because they may be independent.
if they are independent contractors, then they will not be absorbed with this clause as it is right now. And we can imagine that it would be fair to somehow include them also to protect the owner from these sort of risks. So that will certainly have to be looked into by the market. And then the due diligence proviso. Do you think now it can remain as it is, so linked to the insured managers and owners, or will this circle of persons have to be extended?
What about classification societies?
Classifications of societies are dealt with under the classification clause. So there is usually a classification clause which specifically says that any change in class will affect the coverage. So it is not dealt under the Inchmaree clause, but it's certainly one of those standard clauses which is always included in the health insurance, but also in under P&I insurance, of course.
If they are negligence, because I see ship repairs are there.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes
Yes,
there is independent obligation regardless of ship repairs. For example, there are these special surveys when this huge shaft is taken out, and then they fail to notice defects as a class. We covered by this clause.
The clause covers, the classification clause is actually an exclusion. So it says that if there is a change in class, then or if there is any change or any suspension, thank you, of class, that the coverage will be automatically terminated from that moment. So as long as class is in place, regardless of any diligence on any part, the coverage will not be affected. But if we go under the Inchmaree clause, it doesn't deal with classification societies in any manner. So it only talks about the ship owner, the managers, and the persons for crew and master and pilot, and persons for whom the ship owner is responsible. So there would not be any negative effect on insurance if there were negligence on part of the classification society for which the ship owner is not privy.
And so that they would not be, but should it be?
Because
sometimes they are actually liable, and we saw last year in Erika case, the trainer was found negligent for the disaster.
Yeah, they're generally hiding in the home.
Yeah, that's what I think might
But
be
this is-
effective under English law.
But the idea of hull insurance is to give protection to the owner. The contract is between the insurer and the owner, and the idea is that the insurer, as long as the owner is acting with due diligence and has all the certification in place, they will give coverage. That is the idea. I mean, that is the whole purpose of hull insurance. So they will not sanction the owner for negligence of independent contractors. It will give protection, which again always gives them the possibilities of filing subrogated claims against classification or other ship repairers or other persons who were actually in the core of the cause of the damage. So I think the distribution of risk is such to give primarily protection to the owner, and then the insurer will assume this risk, and they will be happy if the owner acts with due diligence. Now, classification society will then be outside of this relationship between them, as long as class is respected and maintained. But on the long run, with the extended automatization of ships in general, the potential scope of the Inchmaree clause is extending constantly, because we have all these new softwares and elements that have so far not been included in a body of the ship, and now are becoming its natural part. Plus, we have all these new persons who directly affect the risk, but are not any longer in a traditional way linked to the ship owner.